Amen. I want to continue on in our study of the book of Revelation. Today we're in chapter 7, and chapter 7 is really something that's going to cover the entire world as it's known in the book of Revelation. Basically, it's about redeeming or protecting the redeemed. And you're going to kind of see the connection here as we get underway in our study. After looking at the throne room, after John was revealed in chapter 4, God upon His throne and the scroll that was in the right hand of Him who sat upon the throne, that's really the unfolding of events now. The Lamb, according to chapter 5, that was slain, that is standing, that has 7 horns and 7 eyes, of course in reference to the conquering Christ, now is worthy to open the 7 seals that were upon that scroll, upon that book, and read the contents. That is, the things that were about to transpire, the things that were about to unfold, the things that were to shortly come to pass. It is now going to be revealed. Now, in chapter 6 that you studied on Wednesday night, there was the beginning of the opening of these 7 seals, and they're in rapid succession. At least 6 of them are. He opens a seal, opens a seal, opens a seal, and then some things begin to occur. Now, the first 4 seals that were opened revealed 4 horsemen. And again, I want you to keep in mind, try to visualize this. Don't get lost in just simply looking at these things in a, kind of in an abstract sort of way. Try to visualize the scene. Remember, we pointed out that studying the book of Revelation is a lot like looking at a mural. You kind of want to just take it all in. And so when the first 4 seals of the book are opened, they reveal some things that are very interesting. When the first seal is opened, John sees a rider on a white horse. And that's a very interesting thing, because when you recognize that white is the symbol of purity in the book of Revelation, really throughout the Bible, then I think what is obvious here, that what John sees in this vision is he sees Jesus Christ, perhaps beginning initially with the preaching of the gospel, the proclamation of the gospel, and the saving of souls. But Jesus Christ is the conqueror. As a matter of fact, the crown that He has on is a crown of victory, not a diadem such as a crown of royalty or a crown of a ruling king. It's Stephanos is the Greek word, and that means a crown of victory. And so the rider of this white horse, obviously, at least in my estimation, is Jesus Christ the conqueror, and it's He and His saints are going to be victorious. They're going to conquer. Then with the opening of the second seal, there is the rider of the red horse, and red, of course, would be symbolic of persecution. Wherever the gospel goes, persecution follows. Jesus pointed this out. If the world hates me or hates you, remember that it hated me first. And if they did this to a green tree, what will they do to a dry tree? And so obviously, when Jesus goes and the gospel goes, persecution is going to follow. And that's what John sees in the opening of the second seal. And this probably represents the persecution of believers by Rome. Now later on, we're going to see Jesus riding the white horse again, coming victoriously. But this is the first time that we see Him, the persecution begins to follow. And then He sees the black horse. And he has a scale in his hand. That's kind of interesting. He's got a scale in his hands, sort of a measuring thing. And so what you see here is economic hardship that's experienced by the Christians. And wheat and barley, these things were just extremely expensive. And the Christians could not even afford the staple items. Probably that has to do more than anything else with the fact that they would not bow down to the emperor and receive the documentation that indicated that they were loyal to Rome, and as a result of not having that documentation, then they were not allowed to buy and sell. But now, while the staple items were extremely rare and they, unobtainable by the Christians, the luxury items were not rare, but they could not afford them. The oil and the wine, these things were in abundance, but the barley and the wheat and the other items that were staple items, they just unable to be obtained by the Christians. And then the opening of the fourth seal, you see the rider of a pale horse. And really the idea of a pale horse is, not like a gray or something like that. It's more like almost a sickly yellow. That would be the color of the horse. And the rider of the horse is death, and Hades followed close behind. This indicates the death of Christians, and perhaps it even refers to the means by which some of these Christians would lose their life. There was the hunger and the sword and the beasts and things of this nature. And perhaps it even refers to the way that some Christians would lose their life. But this is what John sees, and he sees these in rapid succession. And then there's the opening of the fifth seal, and he sees the souls of those who were slain under the altar crying out to God, "How long, O Lord, before you avenge our blood?" So the first four seals, what's interesting about that? The riders of the four horses, what's interesting about the unveiling of these is that John is seeing things from earth's perspective, from the way that these Christians are seeing things. They're seeing the going forth of the cause of Christ. They're seeing the persecution that follows. They're experiencing the economic hardships, and they're experiencing death. These are things those Christians are experiencing. But when John sees the fifth and the sixth seal open, he's going to see things from God's perspective, from heaven's perspective. And so while those Christians saw all of the things of the four horsemen, God is seeing those who are under the altar. Now John is seeing those who are under the altar, and they're crying out to God. They've been martyred for the cause of Christ, and their blood, like the blood of the first martyr Abel, is crying out for retribution, crying out for justice. And so that's what John now sees under the altar. Then he sees at the opening of the sixth seal a disturbance of cosmic proportion. Now don't get lost in looking at this. Did the moon literally turn to this? Did the sun literally do this? We're looking at figures here. We're looking at symbolism. And so what you see here is an upheaval. You're seeing God acting on behalf of these Christians, and there's going to be this great upheaval. It's divine justice that John sees. It's the revenge or the avenging of those Christians who have been martyred that John sees is poured out from God. Now this is not the final judgment. This is not the judgment that we shall stand before God and give an account of the lives that we've lived and the thoughts that we've had and the words that we've expressed. This is not that judgment. It's the judgment that God is going to bring upon the persecuting forces of evil. It's the judgment that God is going to bring upon Rome. Now, Rome was able to persecute these Christians for what we would look at from our perspective as a long, long time. I think the persecution, actual severe persecution of Rome upon these Christians lasted maybe 250 years. And so from our perspective, man, that is a long time. And yes, it would be from our perspective, just like it was a long time when the children of Israel were in Egyptian captivity. But from God's perspective, of course, as one day being like 1,000 years, it's not a long time. So these things are shortly going to occur that going to rid these Christians of this persecuting force. But when he points out that this judgment is going to come upon them, it naturally raises a question. And that question is asked in the last verse of chapter 6. For the great day of his wrath has come. That's the wrath upon Rome. persecuting forces of these Christians. Now, the question then is, who is able to stand? Now, I got to tell you, in my estimation, now remember what we pointed out earlier in our study, when these Christians in the first century received this letter from John, received this apocalypse from John, this revelation, they didn't do like we're doing today. And I'm not being critical of what we're doing. Obviously, this is a Bible study. It's a good Bible study. But they didn't do it like we did. They didn't sit down and study a little bit of it week by week by week. What you would have had is an elder or someone within the congregation stand before that congregation and read this book. Read this letter. Read this scroll in its entirety. And so what they would have seen, they would have seen the risen Christ in chapter 1, the power that He had in chapters 2 and 3. They would have seen the condition of the churches, the things that they needed to strengthen, the things that they needed to improve upon, and the things they needed to continue. And so they would have seen all of that, so they could continue to endure this persecution. Then you get into chapters 4 and 5, seeing this grand revelation from heaven. God is upon His throne. The Lamb is worthy to tell us what's going to happen. The Lamb is worthy to read, to break the seals, and to reveal the contents of this scroll. And then in chapter 6, the unfolding of these things. The boom, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth scroll, or seal on that scroll is unveiled. And so it just seems like a symphony here. It seems like, just like a symphony that you're listening to, and you reach this crescendo, and it's just going up and up and up, and all of a sudden you stop. There's not going to be the opening of the seventh seal at this time. There's this interlude. There's this parenthesis. All this is going on, and suddenly He said, you know what? We're going to answer the question, who is able to stand? And that's what chapter 7 is about. It's going to reveal to us who is able to stand in the day of God's great wrath being poured out upon the persecuting Roman Empire. Now, any questions, any comments? We're just kind of reviewing some of the things that we looked at up to this juncture of time. Well, let's get into chapter 7. And remember that when judgment comes upon the enemies of God, it's going to mean deliverance for the children of God. And I tell you, that's comforting. And that provides a great deal of hope. When God avenges His saints, judgment is coming upon the persecutors, demand deliverance and comfort and hope then is transferred to the Christians who are undergoing tremendous persecution. Now let's notice let's just take time to read what is occurring. That's just sort of a visual there. Let's notice now in verse 7 and just kind of, just glance up and look at the artist's rendition perhaps of what is occurring here. John said, after these things I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. He cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the sea, or the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Then he begins in verses 5 through 8 to list those of the tribe of Judah, and Reuben, and Gad, and Asher, and Naphtali, and Manasseh, and Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And 12,000 out of each tribe, which would have then totaled the 144,000 that he saw sealed. What we need to do is, and again, what are we dealing with here? Symbolism. Now that's something we've got to keep in mind and not literalize the things that need not to be literalized. We've got to look at the symbolism here. Now, remember, this sealing answers what question? Who is able to stand? Now, who is able to stand in the day of God's wrath? It's going to be these 144,000. Why are they able to stand? Because they have been sealed by God. And that's that's the very beautiful picture that is being presented here. Now, most commentators, and I tend to agree to an extent with the things that are being said about this, want to remind us in the first place of what a seal indicates. Somebody describe for me a seal as it would be used at that time, maybe even today, for that matter. What is a seal? Say again? That's what. But I'm looking actually at the actual seal itself, and we'll get to the good point that you made there. What is the actual seal?
There's like a king would use it to like seal a document, and there'd be a little bit of wax put on, and then the mark of that king imprinted in that
wax, and that was on the document. So knowing then what a seal is, we do recognize now, as it's being used here, that it would be figurative, it would be symbolic. Now, just like Kyle was pointing out, the seal represents something. That's what you need to realize here. When God is sealing these, it represents them. So what we've got to do is kind of look at some other passages in the Bible and recognize how seal is used. It verifies ownership, according to the Song of Solomon. Just what David was talking about there. This came from the king. This signifies ownership. These are my people, is what God is saying. I am sealing my people. I am putting my stamp of ownership on my people. It assures genuineness, as it's used in the book of Esther. And so these are genuine. These are my people. They're the real thing, as opposed to the false prophet, as opposed to the false or the beast. And these are my people. These are my protected people, and that's exactly what a seal would indicate in this juncture. A protected people. Now, let me go. I want to go back, and I've got the reference there in the overhead. I want to go back to the book of Ezekiel, because I believe, as we pointed out earlier, there are a lot of references in the book of Revelation that find as their source much of the revelation of the Old Testament. And I believe if we can understand what is occurring in Ezekiel 9, we kind of get an idea of what's going on in Revelation 7. But in Ezekiel 9, there was going to be the wicked, ungodly people were going to be slain because of their wickedness and their ungodliness. And verse 2 of Ezekiel 9 says, "Suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, with faces north, each with his battle axe in his hand. One man among them was clothed with linen, and they had a writer's inkhorn at his side. They went in and stood beside the bronze altar." Now, what you find here is that these with the battle axe, these that had axes in, they were going to slaughter the wicked people. But now, what the one with the ink well was going to do, it's kind of like somebody with maybe a Sharpie marker. He was going to go around and he was going to identify the good guys. Now, the glory of God, from the God of Israel, had gone up from the cherub where it had been at the threshold of the temple, and he called to the man cloaked with linen who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. And the Lord said to him, "Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it." To the others he said, in my hearing, "Go after him through the city and kill him, and kill. Do not let any eye spare, nor have any pity." So what they were to do, everybody who did not have that mark was going to be killed. men, women, old people, young people, they were going to be destroyed. But the ones that were sealed with that mark were going to be protected. This, I believe, is the symbolism that we need to see in Revelation 7. God is going to protect it, not having a literal mark. They're not going to be, drop a chunk of wax on their head and put a signet ring upon it. But they were going to be protected. That's the all the others, which are represented by the sea, and by the earth, and by the trees, they're going to be killed. They're going to be destroyed. They're going to be punished for their wickedness. On the other hand, these 144,000 are going to be spared, because like in the book of Ezekiel, they've been identified as being righteous, and holy, and godly, and faithful. They're God's people. And so they're the ones, and by the way, they're the ones that are on earth. Jehovah's Witnesses like to look at this and say these are the only ones that's going to heaven. And as a matter of fact, even a portion of the theory of American Muslims, black Muslims, is that only 144,000 black men are going to go to heaven. Well, these 144,000 are not in heaven. They're on the earth. Seal those that are on the earth, you see. These are the Christians who are undergoing persecution. They're going to be protected. They're the ones, when God pours out His wrath upon wrong, who are going to be spared the wrath of God. That's poured out upon wrong. Now, we looked at what the seal indicates, so let's look at those sealed. The 144,000. This is all of God's people who are on the earth. 12, of course, is, we looked at the numerology of the book of Revelation at the very beginning. 12 is sort of a religious number, if I can use that phrase. The 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles. And so you get the multiple of this. You get 144,000, as you've seen in the listing of the tribes there. And then multiple by 10, by 10, by 10. But you get 144,000. So it's all of God's people that are on the earth. And what we need to recognize from this is God, and this is so comforting too. And it would have been for the first century Christians. God never confuses the saved with the lost. Isn't that comforting? God, we can be in a crowd, and maybe the multitude with which we happen to be in, God's not going to confuse us with the wicked. God looks at these Christians, and they're just a little portion of the populace. And God said, I'm going to protect you. He doesn't lose it. God knows those who are His own. You remember even back at the church at Sardis in Revelation 3 and verse 5. It had nothing good to say about that dead church, but He says, you know what? I look in there, and there are a few souls, even in Sardis, who have not, polluted their garment. They shall walk with me. Why? God never loses sight of His people. And that's what we can take away from this. Furthermore, the tribes there that are listed, don't get hung up on that. Because if you do, you're going to recognize that some tribes were omitted, and some tribes, Joseph was there. Tribe of Dan and Ephraim were omitted, and get all balked out. That's not important, because what he's talking about here is spiritual Israel, the church, the saints. That's who the 144,000 are, those who are going through this severe persecution. Any comments, any observations?
On your comments about the Jehovah's Witnesses, if you take this all literally, the only ones going to heaven will be Jews. Chapter 14 says they will be virgin males. I'm way ahead of you.
Yeah, but you're right. Please go right ahead. Yeah.
They'll be only men who've never been married. So women, you don't have a chance going to heaven. And we don't either, because we're Gentiles. They can only be Jewish, unmarried males.
From literal tribes. From these literal tribes.
Must be 12,000 for each one.
Yeah. That is exactly right. And so this, again, ought to alert us early on. We're not dealing with literalism here. We're dealing with symbols. Get the picture. And I appreciate what Moses said. Get the picture. Hear what God wants us to see. Wrath is coming upon Rome. These Christians are going to be spared the wrath that is poured out upon Rome. Now, after seeing that, well, I need to point this out too. God's people would be sealed, protected. The coming judgment with its plagues would not come upon them. Now, after this, he sees a great multitude. These are where? They're in heaven. You see, again, the Jehovah's Witnesses got that all switched around. They've got the great multitude going to live on planet Earth and the 144,000 in heaven. But if you look at the teaching of the book of Revelation, you actually have the 144,000 on earth and you have the great multitude in heaven. Now, actually, you know, it's kind of interesting because what John is seeing here, he's seeing those who have gone through this great tribulation, the 144,000 that you just mentioned. While they may be, you know, different insofar as the way that they're described here, probably has reference to the same group of people. One is sealed upon the earth. Now he's going to get a glimpse of after they've gone through what they're able to accomplish, or what they're able to receive as a result of what they accomplish. After these things I looked and behold a great multitude. Well, by the way, did John see the 144,000? Huh? He heard the number. He didn't see. This is the first time in this in this chapter that John actually now visualizes. The number was heard by him. Now he turns and sees, this is around the throne, he sees an innumerable multitude.
Okay, 144,000, that's innumerable. You know that number. Yes. So it's more than 144,000.
Well, it would be all of those. We're going to see all of those who came. There's some already dead. There's some already, remember, they're under the altar. Many slain souls under the altar. They're standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palm branches in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Now, these are the, and we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but these are the ones who have come through the persecution. We'll get more into that as we get into our questions, and you know, kind of identify them and talk about them and discuss what it is that they're doing. Anything you want to bring up before we start asking questions? And I've talked a long time, and I got to get these questions in quick. 10 of them. Quick. So listen quick. Answer quick. Anything else you'd like to bring up? Now this is really just the questions are going to be maybe basically like a review of some of the things that we've talked about. Verse 1 begins, after these things. What things are being referred to here? Second. Exactly. Initially, that is referring to the opening of the first 6 seals. Here's something we need to think about too. That after these things is used very often in the book of Revelation as presenting a new thought. Yeah, it has a context, as Kyle pointed out, after the opening of these first 6 seals. It's always got a context. But it often refers to a new thought. Like we would say, you know, well, meanwhile, or something of that nature. It kind of shows you a shift, a sort of a segue into a different thought. And of course, the new thought here is the sealing of the believers. So after the opening of the first 6 seals, John now introduces this interlude, this pause that's taking place in the action. All right, question 2. What do you think is the significance of 4 angels, 4 corners of the earth, and 4 wings? take them in order. What about the 4 angels, Dave?
Well, I think the 4, you were talking about that being completeness on earth, so I think it's talking about the whole earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at those as a group, not individually.
Right. And that's really the only way that we can logically deal with this. So we're looking at, you know, as a cosmic number here, the whole earth. 4 angels these are those, and don't just look at them as just, like David says, we're looking at the wrath of God being poured out. The angels are presented here as God's avenging angels, God's judges, that is going to inflict this vengeance upon the earth. Susan?
I figure that the significance of there being 4 angels is all 4 corners of the earth, and those represent completeness of earth. They're completely covered.
Absolutely.
There's an angel in each post. There's nothing to be missed.
You are absolutely right. And this is the picture. What Susie and David are talking. This is the picture. Remember, I talk about visualizing this. This is the picture we need to see. You remember back when we looked at the throne scene, remember the lightnings and the thunders and all of this that was coming from the throne. There's a storm on the way. And it's going to be these angels who are going to bring this storm. These are God's avenging angels. And it's going to be complete. It's going to be a total judgment that's going to come upon Rome. 4 corners of the earth, the whole surface of the earth. And by the way, when we see earth in the book of Revelation, many times you need to think Rome. Think Rome. Judgment's going to come upon the whole earth. Think Rome. It's going to come upon the persecutors of the church. So think Rome. So it's going to come completely upon Rome. And the 4 winds, yeah. Winds of judgment, as Susie pointed out, is going to blow from every direction. There's not going to be any escape. It's kind of like that fellow you read about in the Old Testament. You know, he pours a bear in wine, and the snake gets. You're not going to get away from this. You're the persecuting Roman Empire. Justice is going to be done. Question 3. What did the 5th angel, announce that he had? And what do you think it represented?
The seal of the living God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sword.
Yeah. Yeah. Do not harm the earth, the sea, the trees, till we have sealed the servants, because that's what he had, the seal of the living God. And again, we're looking at what here? What's the picture? Huh?
Who's able to stand?
Yeah, who's able to stand? Protection. God is going to protect, He's going to maintain, and He's going to save His people. That's the seal of God. He's going to protect them. And I tell you, that ought to be comforting to us today, even though we're not undergoing anything comparable to what they were undergoing. God is going to protect us. And He's going to maintain us. And I think it's significant that they were sealed on the forehead. If you can get your mind locked into the fact that God loves you and God protects you and God saves you and God showers you with His grace and His mercy and His providence, if you can get that locked in your mind, if you can get that sealed in your mind, then you can endure. You can go through any tribulation that will come upon you, no matter what it is, Dave.
And the forehead is a prominent location,
Right.
not something that's easily hidden.
Right. Exactly. Right. Excellent. Excellent point. How many received the seal on their foreheads?
144,000.
Thank you. Did we cover that? Yeah. 144,000. Now, was this a literal number? Mo's already pointed out something to us. It's very important. Was this a literal number? Can we say, no, it was not a literal number. It was representative of all of God's people who were on the earth who was going to be saved. If it were a literal number, then there must have been a literal seal upon their foreheads. We can't take part of it and make it literal, part of it make it spiritual. It's got to be, they had to have a literal seal. Only Jewish men, only unmarried Jewish men, only men unmarried from literal tribes. and they were on the earth and certainly not in heaven. God would protect them from tribulation. He would not remove their tribulation, rather, but He would protect them when judgment came upon them. That's one thing we need to recognize. God is not going to reach in and yank us out of the circumstance we're going through. Not going to do that. But God will protect you as long as you have that seal, as long as your mind is focused.
And we're talking in pictures here. He may not physically protect our body.
Oh, no, they're going to die. Some of them are going to die. Yeah.
He's protecting our soul.
Yeah, some of these are going to die.
Right.
Some of these are yet to die. That John's writing to. Lynn's right. That's a good point. This doesn't mean that God is going to, keep these people from being, persecuted, keep them from being killed, or keep them from economic desolation. It's not. These things are going to continue to happen. It's the enduring, and this is what we're going to see. I think when we get to question 10 in our worksheet, we're going to see that. After listing the tribes of Israel that were sealed, John announces another vision. And what did he see in that second vision? Great multitude that no man could number, from every nation, tribe, peoples, and tongue, standing before the throne. These were on the other side of persecution. These were the victors. And just as Linda pointed out, it doesn't mean their lives are going to be dead. These are the ones that have gone through the persecution, but during that persecution, they remained faithful. They remained faithful to God. What were these doing that John saw? And why were they doing it?
They were praising God because He saved them.
Yeah, they were crying, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. The elders joined in. The 24 elders that were around the throne, the 4 living creatures, the angels. And they all, joined in on that chord. They were praising God, not because He kept them from being martyred, not because He removed the persecution from them, but because He saved them, because they endured. And now they're in the presence of God. And now they get the picture. You see, they get the whole picture. Richard? These palm branches kind of represents a victorious respect, a victorious rejoicing that we'll see in just a second. In verse 9, John mentions 4 things depicting the numberless multitude standing before the throne of God. How did he describe this numberless multitude? They were all
from every nation, tribe, peoples, and tongue.
That is exactly right. Every nation, ethnic group, every tribe, every family group, every people, that is social group, every tongue, every linguistic group, they were there. They were in this great multitude. Black, white, red. We sing that song, Jesus Loves the Little Children. Right here you see evidence of that. Now, this is with what were they clothed, and then what did they have in their hands? White robes, which designate purity, and which enabled them to stand and be victorious. The palm branches were symbols of a festive wave of victory, just as when Jesus entered in the city of Jerusalem. What did the multitude cry out with a loud voice? They cried out, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. I'll tell you, what this tells me is, without hope, we're not going to endure. Hope is the anchor of the soul, Hebrews 6 and verse 19. And so what God is doing here is He has John to present hope to these suffering Christians. Get through it, and this is yours. Remain faithful, and this is what's going to happen. I'm in control. Trust me. It will occur. And as we pointed out, that doesn't mean they're not going to die. They certainly, many of them would. But be faithful unto death, and I'll give you the crown of life. What 7 things did the angels who stood around God's throne and the elders and the 4 living creatures say belongs to God forever and ever? 7 things.
Blessing, Lord, wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, power, and might.
That's exactly right. These all represent something. Blessings, glory, wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, and power, they all belong to God, the Savior of these people. In question 9, who are those John sees in this second vision? Who are they?
Came out of the Great Tribulation.
That's right. These are the ones who came out of the Great Tribulation. They're the ones who have overcome. Now they're rewarded and they're blessed. With what are they rewarded?
Salvation.
Now, he kind of describes that real interestingly. Yeah, it is salvation.
No more hunger or heat. The Lamb will lead the springs of life and wipe away all tears.
Yeah. And what you're seeing here, and he's going to talk about this again later in the book, but this kind of gives you a glimpse of the reward that God has in store for His people. And I just sort of look at it like these are going to be with God forever in heaven. Right now they're undergoing severe persecution. One day you'll be with me in heaven. You know, some people ask me, what's heaven like? That's all you need to know right there. That's all you need to know. You're going to be with God forever and forever.
And it says
Can we ask for any more?
It says they serve Him night and day.
Now that's interesting too. You know, sometimes we think, what are we going to do in heaven? Are we just going to sit up there and sing songs just like one big singing? You know, now turn in your hymn book to song number 1,696,413. No. We've got a service that we do. Something, I don't know. But you can rest assured we're going to be serving God. And that's what they are. Linda?
And there will be no grumbling about serving. We will all willingly.
Oh, absolutely. And these will never be made to suffer famine, hunger, pestilence ever again. And they will forever be cared for and provided for by the Lamb who is opening the seals, the conquering Christ. There will never, ever, ever be another tear shed. What hope. 7 seals. 6 of them have been opened. Now God protects His people. And now we're going to see in chapter 8 the opening of the 7th seal that's going to introduce 7 trumpets that are going to be. Any comments? Any questions? Stand.
Besides Christ's return, besides Christ's return, this is the first time that those are beyond the living speak to us. And here, and they heard, John heard them, he saw everything, and that's the first time we've been able to go beyond.
Well, now the ones that are in this great multitude, they're not aware of what John's saying. It's John's. Yeah, right.